First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Next, they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out, for I was not a trade unionist. Then, they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then, they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. This is a quote by Martin Niemöller, and today's topic is due process in the United States, and how the erosion of it for even one person is the erosion of it for everyone. This government is descending into full-scale authoritarianism, and they are attacking democratic institutions. They're trying to weaken all opposition and consolidate power way faster than I thought was even possible in a country like the United States. It is really terrifying, and it's breathtaking how they are getting away with a lot of it. I don't like comparing the US to World War II Germany, and I don't actually personally believe that Trump is anything like Hitler, but I also think it's ignorant to ignore some of the similarities in what's happening now and what happened in 1933 and onward, as Hitler became chancellor, and then the president died, and he became Führer when he combined the chancellorship and presidency. And then he just attacked all of the democratic institutions, consolidated power, attacked the courts. By the way, also imposed tariffs on all of his trading partners. And then when the economy got even worse, he had to consolidate power and try to appease by trying to invade nearby countries, Czechoslovakia, Austria, Poland to start, and then expanding even further when he succeeded in invading those countries. Does any of that sound like what's happening now? Tariffs, talking about invading Canada and Greenland, attacking and marginalizing one group of people in the United States. Right now it's immigrants for all of the United States' problems. Hitler said he wanted to restore greatness to Germany. Trump says he wants to make America great again. So the totalitarian playbook is being repeated in a lot of ways. And what scares me the most in all of this is the attack on the judiciary. We are supposed to have three co-equal branches of government. Congress is completely useless right now. They've just given up all of their powers to the president. Anyone who grew up in the United States and went to public school might have seen Schoolhouse Rock growing up. And one of the simple things we learned from that cartoon is that Congress has the power of the purse. They have the power of tariffs. But Trump has somehow used an emergency exception to impose tariffs on the world. And by the way, that emergency is the opioid epidemic. And they're saying, okay, we're gonna use that now to impose tariffs on Canada and China because there's an emergency coming from opioids. It's complete BS. I mean, he's basically just using loopholes in the law to justify it. And no one is standing up to him except for the courts. And then he's attacking the courts. And very recently, on April 21st, after the Supreme Court basically issued an emergency midnight order saying you can't just deport people without a hearing because it violates due process. It's okay that you labeled them as enemies under the Alien Enemy Act. They still have a right to contest that. You can't just say you're an enemy and therefore you're getting deported and you have no right to challenge whether or not you are actually a part of the group of enemies who I've laid out, which in this case is a Venezuelan gang. And we've already seen that many people who are not actually Venezuelan gang members have been caught up in the mix of this and deported to a death camp, basically, in El Salvador. Trump went crazy after the Supreme Court basically said you can't do that. And on April 21st, he posted, "I'm doing exactly what I was elected to do, remove criminals from our country, but the courts don't seem to want me to do that. My team is fantastic, doing an incredible job. However, they are being stymied at every turn by even the US Supreme Court, which I have such great respect for, but which seemingly doesn't want me to send violent criminals and terrorists back to Venezuela or any other country for that matter. People that came here illegally. You need to prove they came here illegally and that they are a part of the alien enemies you are claiming are an enemy of the US. People people have a right to a hearing. That's literally what makes America America, is due process. The courts are intimidated by the radical left who are playing the ref. Great Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito correctly wants to dissolve the pause on deportations. He is right on this. If we don't get these criminals out of our country, we are not going to have a country any longer. Right there, the fear mongering right there is literally what Hitler did when he said all of society's problems, all our economic problems are caused by the Jews. You can't just blame one group of people and say we're not going to have a country any longer unless you give me this unprecedented amount of power. We cannot give everyone a trial because to do so would, without exaggeration, take 200 years. We need to have hundreds of thousands of trials for hundreds of thousands of illegals we are sending out of this country. So right there, he admits it. And by the way, he ends it by saying, make America great again. Right there, though, he admits that they don't have due process, but they do. They have due process under the Constitution, under the 5th and 14th Amendments. And to get rid of due process for one person is to get rid of due process for everyone. The erosion of due process begins with this test case. And there has been an appropriate amount of pushback by the courts. The courts are the last institution that we have that's really standing up to Trump. You know, Harvard University recently stood up to him. A couple law firms stood up to him. But the courts are the most important institution right now, and we all need to support the courts. And these judges, especially in the lower courts, are getting death threats. Trump is calling for their impeachment. The Supreme Court Justice John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, even issued a statement saying it's not appropriate to call for impeachment of federal judges because you disagree with the decision. The appropriate remedy is appealing. I've never seen a Supreme Court justice say something like that to the President of the United States before. So we are in crazy times right now. If you've been paying attention and seen the interview where the President of El Salvador and President Trump were in a press conference, Trump even later said, I would like to send US citizens to El Salvador. I'd like to deport them. I got to see if that's legal. I got to talk to the lawyers. So he's floating the idea. And if that happens, anyone is fair game for just being kicked out of the United States, especially if he doesn't like you or he declares the group of people you belong to be an enemy of the United States. If he says that you, a US citizen, are an alien enemy, right? Just for example, you don't think that's going to happen. We'll see. If he says that you are an alien enemy, and turns out you're not an alien, you were born in the US, and you're not an enemy, you're not a part of that group, but you associate with that group in some way or the other, wouldn't you want the right to challenge that? Don't you think due process in some capacity is important before you're being deprived of your life in the United States? So, guys, I understand that the optics of this are he's getting rid of the criminals. I get that. But the reality is that he's getting rid of some people who are not criminals. And if he can get away with that, he can get away with a lot more than that. So this fight right now is really a fight for due process. And if you get rid of due process, anyone is fair game.